The police stopped me with guns drawn, shouting that my car was stolen, and I swear my heart forgot how to beat. In the back of that cruiser, I learned the report came from my own sister. By nightfall, my inheritance account was locked. A lawyer wouldn't take my calls, and someone had been inside my father's storage unit. I didn't know what scared me more, losing the estate or realizing she'd planned every step. The air inside my sedan still smelled like dry cleaning and nervous sweat. I loosened the grip on the steering wheel, flexing my fingers one by one to work out the stiffness. It was 4 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the late autumn sun was already beginning to drag long, golden shadows across the pavement of Briar Glen. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My blazer was a little tight across the shoulders, a relic from a life I had before everything fell apart. But I looked professional. I looked capable. The hiring manager at the logistics firm had nodded at the right times, smiled at my answers about supply chain management, and shaken my hand with what felt like genuine interest. I could do this. I could get the job. I could make rent next month without dipping into the emergency fund that was already dangerously low. I exhaled a long, shaky breath, reaching for the radio dial to turn down the low hum of the news station. I needed silence to think. My mind drifted, as it always did lately, to the stack of paperwork sitting on my kitchen counter. Dad had been gone for 3 months. 92 days of silence where his laugh used to be. The estate was supposed to be simple. He had told us that 1,000 times. I am leaving it all in order. Naomi, half for you, half for Tessa. No fighting. The memory of his voice made my chest ache. He had believed in fairness the way other people believed in God. He never could have predicted that the moment the dirt hit his casket, fairness would evaporate. I was driving 5 miles under the speed limit, careful and precise, just wanting to get back to my apartment, take off the stiff blazer, and maybe call Marin, the only friend who hadn't treated me like a fragile glass doll since the funeral. Blue lights exploded in my rearview mirror. My stomach dropped, a physical lurch that felt like missing a step on a staircase. I glanced at the speedometer, 29 in a 35 zone. I checked my seatbelt. Clicked. My registration tag was current. I had stuck the sticker on myself 2 months ago. I signaled and pulled over to the shoulder, the gravel crunching loudly under my tires. I put the car in park and rolled down the window. Preparing my polite, cooperative face, I was 33 years old, a woman with a clean record and a master's degree. I had nothing to hide. I reached toward the glove compartment to get my registration. "Driver, put your hands out the window." Now. The voice didn't come from a person standing by my door. It boomed from a loudspeaker, distorted and aggressive. I froze, my hand hovering halfway to the latch. "Driver, hands out the window. Do it now." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, bird-like rhythm. I slowly withdrew my hand and stuck both arms out the window, palms open. The autumn air bit at my skin. In the side mirror, I saw them. Not one officer, 2, and they weren't walking up with ticket books. They were crouching behind their open doors, weapons drawn, the barrels leveled directly at the back of my head. Panic, cold and sharp, washed over me. This was a mistake. This was a terrifying, absurd mistake. "Open the door from the outside with your left hand," the voice commanded. "Step out slowly." I fumbled for the handle, my fingers shaking so badly I slipped twice before the latch clicked. I pushed the door open with my hip and stepped out onto the asphalt. My legs felt like water. Walk backwards toward my voice. "Do not turn around." I did as I was told, shuffling backward in my sensible interview heels. I could see the houses across the street. Mrs. Gable was standing on her porch, her hand over her mouth. A man walking a golden retriever had stopped on the sidewalk, watching with wide, judgmental eyes. I wanted to scream at them that I hadn't done anything, that I was Naomi Patterson, that I was just coming home from a job interview. "Stop, get on your knees, hands on your head." The asphalt was rough against my knees, tearing through my stockings. I interlaced my fingers behind my head, squeezing my eyes shut as heavy boots crunched toward me. Rough hands grabbed my wrists, yanking them down behind my back. The metal of the handcuffs bit into my skin. Cold and unforgiving. "You are making a mistake," I said, my voice trembling so hard it sounded like a stranger's. "This is my car. I have the registration in the glove box." "My name is Naomi Patterson." The officer who hauled me up by the elbow didn't look interested in my name. He was young, with a buzz cut and eyes that looked right through me. "We will verify that." "Ma'am," he said, his tone flat. He walked me to the cruiser and pushed me into the back seat. The hard plastic seat forced me to sit at an awkward angle to accommodate my bound hands. The door slammed shut, sealing me in. I watched through the caged window as the second officer began to search my car. He was tossing things: my portfolio, my spare sweater, the bag of mints I kept in the center console. He opened the glove box and pulled out the registration. "See?" I whispered to the empty air. "It is mine." But the officer didn't look relieved. He looked at the registration, then back at his computer, and shook his head. He said something into his radio. I sat there for 20 minutes, humiliated, while neighbors I had waved to for years peered out from behind their curtains. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe, tried to channel my father's calm. "It is just a clerical error. It is just a misunderstanding." When the young officer finally opened the door, he didn't uncuff me. "Naomi Patterson," he said, "you are being detained for possession of a stolen vehicle." "No," I said, the word bursting out of me. "That is impossible. I bought that car 3 years ago. It is paid off. Look at the title." "The vehicle was reported stolen this morning," he said, reciting the words like a script, reported by who I demanded, my fear giving way to a sudden, hot spark of anger. "Who reported it?" He didn't answer. He just shut the door, got in the front seat, and put the car in drive. The police station was a landscape of fluorescent lights and scuffed linoleum. They chained my wrist to a metal bar on a bench while they processed the paperwork. I felt stripped bare, my blazer wrinkled, my hair coming loose from its bun. After an hour of silence, a detective came over. He was older, looking tired, holding a clipboard. "Ms. Patterson," he said, "I have the report here. The vehicle was flagged this morning. I told the officers," I said, keeping my voice steady by sheer force of will, "that car belongs to me. It is registered to me. The registered owner is the estate of David Patterson." He said. My breath hitched. I had transferred the title to the estate pending the probate closure, on the advice of the lawyer, to consolidate assets. But I was the beneficiary. I was the driver. The report states that the vehicle was taken without permission from the primary residence. He continued. It lists specific identifying markers: a scratch on the rear passenger bumper, approximately 3 inches long. I stared at him. I knew that scratch. I had backed into a concrete planter at the grocery store 6 months ago. I hadn't told anyone. It was stupid and embarrassing. The only person who knew about it was my sister, Tessa. I had pointed it out to her in the driveway 2 weeks ago, laughing about how I needed to get some touch-up paint. "Who filed the report?" I asked, though the cold feeling in my gut told me I already knew the answer. "The report was filed by the administrator of the estate," he said. "Tessa Caldwell." The name hung in the air between us, heavy and toxic. Tessa, my sister. My sister had called the police on me. She had picked up a phone, dialed 911, and told armed officers that I was a criminal. She knew I had a job interview today. She knew I would be driving that car. "She is my sister," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "She knows I have that car. I have been driving it for 3 years. The detective shrugged. Not unkindly, but with the weary indifference of a man who saw family disputes every day. "She claims you took the keys and the vehicle this morning without authorization and refused to return it. She stated she feared you were attempting to liquidate estate assets unlawfully." "Liquidate assets," I repeated. "It is a Honda. I need it to get to work." "Look," he said, sighing, "since the car is technically estate property, and she is the administrator, she has the legal right to report it if she believes it is being misused. However, Since you are a beneficiary and family, we are not going to book you on Grand Theft Auto today, but we have to impound the car until the ownership dispute is settled. You are taking my car, I asked. We have to. It is disputed property now. He uncuffed me. I rubbed my wrists, looking at the red indentations where the metal had bitten in. You can go, he said. But Ms. Patterson, do not go near that car at the impound lot, and I suggest you call your sister. I walked out of the station into the cooling evening air. I didn't have a car. I didn't have my ride home. I stood on the sidewalk, clutching my purse, and felt a tear slide down my cheek. I wiped it away angrily. I pulled out my phone. My hands were still shaking. I didn't call Tessa. I couldn't. If I heard her voice right now, I would scream things that would only make me look like the unstable person she was painting me to be. Instead, I dialed the number for Holloway Reese Legal Group. They were my father's attorneys. They were supposed to be neutral. They were handling the trust. It rang 4 times before a receptionist picked up. Holloway and Reese, how may I direct your call? This is Naomi Patterson. I said, I need to speak to Lyle Holloway immediately. It is an emergency regarding the Patterson estate. There was a pause, followed by the sound of typing. I am sorry. Ms. Patterson, the receptionist said. Her voice was smooth, polished, and utterly devoid of warmth. Mr. Holloway is unavailable. Then let me speak to his associate, or anyone. My sister just had me arrested for driving my own car. I need someone to explain to the police that this is a mistake. Ms. Patterson, the receptionist said, cutting me off. We have been instructed that all communications regarding the estate must go through the primary point of contact. I am a beneficiary, I shouted, losing my composure. I am his daughter. The primary point of contact is Tessa Caldwell. She repeated, we cannot discuss active matters with other parties at this time. If you have inquiries, please direct them to the administrator. She hung up. I stared at the phone screen, the black glass reflecting my stunned face. Cannot discuss active matters. I had sat in their conference room 3 months ago. Lyle Holloway had given me coffee. He had looked me in the eye and said, we are here to serve the family. Now I was another party. I called a rideshare. The cost of the trip making me wince. $35. I had $900 in my checking account. Rent was due in 5 days. The ride home was a blur of passing streetlights. I replayed the conversation with the detective, took the car without permission. That wasn't just a lie. That was legal phrasing. That was the kind of language you used when you were building a case for something bigger than a stolen sedan. When the car dropped me off at my apartment complex, I felt a wave of relief just seeing my front door. I just wanted to go inside, lock the deadbolt, and pretend the world didn't exist until morning. I walked up the pathway to my unit. My mailbox was a cluster of metal slots near the entryway. I stopped. The door to my box was hanging slightly ajar. I frowned. I always clicked it shut. I reached inside. It was empty. My heart gave a strange, syncopated thump. I knew for a fact that the certified letters regarding the estate appraisal timeline were supposed to arrive this week. The tracking number had said, out for delivery this morning. I looked down at the ground. There was nothing there. No wind-blown papers. Just the concrete. Someone had opened my mailbox. I hurried to my front door, jamming the key into the lock with trembling fingers. I threw the door open and scanned the apartment. Nothing looked disturbed. The TV was where it should be. My laptop was on the coffee table, but the safety of the space felt violated. I dropped my purse on the floor and went straight to the laptop. I sat on the edge of the couch, not even bothering to turn on the lights. The glow of the screen illuminated the dark living room. I opened the browser and went to the secure portal for my father's trust. I needed to see the documents. I needed to see if Tessa had uploaded anything new, if there was any justification for what happened today. I typed in my username. I typed in my password. DadCoffee1955. Invalid username or password. I frowned. I typed it again. Slower. DadCoffee1955. Invalid username or password. My pulse began to speed up again. I clicked the forgot password link. Please answer your security question. The screen prompted. I waited for the question I had selected years ago. What was the name of your first elementary school instead? The text on the screen read, "Where did your parents meet?" I stared at the words. I hadn't set that question. I knew the answer: they met at a diner in Chicago, but I hadn't said it. That was a question Tessa would choose. It was the kind of sentimental detail she loved to leverage. I typed, Chicago. Incorrect answer. I typed diner. Incorrect answer. I typed Joni's Diner. Account locked. Please contact the administrator. I sat back, the laptop burning my thighs. The silence in the apartment was deafening. This wasn't an emotional outburst. If Tessa had just been angry, she might have screamed at me. She might have sent a nasty text. She might have refused to come to Thanksgiving, but she hadn't done those things. She had filed a police report with specific, damaging details that painted me as a thief. She had contacted the lawyers and cut off my access to information. She had, I was almost certain, intercepted my legal mail. And she had changed the security protocols on a trust account that contained the legacy my father had built over 40 years. I stood up and walked to the window, peering out through the blinds at the parking lot where my car should have been. I thought about the last time I saw Tessa. It was at the funeral reception. She had been wearing a black dress that cost more than my rent, holding court in the corner, dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. When I had approached her to ask about the funeral costs, she had waved a hand dismissively. "Don't worry about the details. Naomi," she had said, "I will handle the heavy lifting. You just focus on getting yourself together." At the time, I thought she was being protective. I thought she was referring to the fact that I had just been laid off 2 weeks before Dad died. Now, standing in the dark, the words echoed differently. Getting yourself together. She was building a narrative. The stolen car report wasn't about the car. It was a document. A police-verified document stating that Naomi Patterson took assets without permission. The character concern the lawyers likely had on file. That would be supported by the police report. The locked account. That was to keep me blind while she moved the pieces. It was procedural. It was cold. And it was too smart for Tessa to have come up with on her own. Tessa was mean. Yes, she was petty. But she wasn't a strategist. She didn't know how to weaponize the legal system. Someone was helping her. I walked into the kitchen and poured a glass of water, my hands steadying now that the shock was turning into a cold, hard clarity. My father had left the estate to be divided fairly. 50-50. He had said, "You girls are all I have." Tessa didn't want 50%. She wanted it all, and she was going to use the law, the police, and my own grief to take it. I took a sip of the water. It was cool and clean. I thought about the officers with their guns drawn. I thought about the neighbors watching me on my knees. I thought about the emptiness of my mailbox. They thought they had broken me today. They thought that by scaring me, by humiliating me, I would back down. I would retreat. I would let Big Sister Tessa handle the heavy lifting. I set the glass down on the counter with a sharp clack. I went back to the living room and picked up my phone. I didn't call Tessa. I didn't call the firm. I opened my calendar and looked at tomorrow's date. Wednesday. The county records office opened at 8 o'clock in the morning. If Tessa wanted a war, she was going to get one, but she had made one critical mistake. She thought she was fighting the little sister who used to cry when her dolls were taken away. She forgot that I was the one who stayed by Dad's side while he fought the cancer that eventually took him. I knew how to endure pain, and I knew how to fight for the things that mattered. I sat down on the couch and pulled a notebook from my bag. I wrote down the time of the arrest. I wrote down the officers' names. I wrote down the conversation with the receptionist. I turned the page and wrote one word at the top, underlining it twice: evidence. The tears were gone. The fear was still there, lurking in the corners of the room. But it was different now. It was fuel. I turned off the lamp, leaving the apartment in darkness, waiting for the morning to come. The Merrill County Records Office smelled of old paper, floor wax, and the specific, dusty apathy of bureaucracy. I stood at the counter at 8:15 in the morning. my hands pressed flat against the cool laminate to stop them from trembling. I had taken 2 buses to get here, navigating the morning commute without my car, surrounded by strangers who had no idea that my own sister had labeled me a criminal less than 24 hours ago. The clerk was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses suspended on a beaded chain. She looked at the request form I had filled out, then up at me, her eyes narrowing slightly behind the lenses. "You are looking for filings regarding the David Patterson estate," she said, not asking, but confirming. "Yes," I said. "My father. I am a beneficiary. I need to see if any petitions have been filed recently." She typed something into her terminal, the keystrokes loud in the quiet room. She stared at the screen for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "There was a filing submitted yesterday morning," she said. "An emergency petition for temporary administration." My stomach twisted. Yesterday morning, before the police stopped me, before the sun had even fully risen on the day my life capsized. "May I see it?" I asked. She printed a document, the machine whirring and spitting out pages. She slid the stack across the counter. I flipped past the standard cover sheet, scanning the dense legal jargon until I found the section labeled Petitioner, Tessa Caldwell. And there, under the section for reason for emergency appointment, immediate protection of estate assets required due to uncooperative beneficiary behavior and risk of dissipation. I felt the blood drain from my face. Dissipation. It was a fancy legal word for stealing, for wasting. I turned the page. Attached to the petition was a supplemental declaration. It was titled, "Statement of Concern Regarding Beneficiary Naomi Patterson." I read the first paragraph, and the air seemed to leave the room. The petitioner asserts that the beneficiary, Naomi Patterson, has a documented history of financial instability and erratic behavior following the decedent's passing. The petitioner fears that without immediate administrative control, the beneficiary will liquidate tangible assets to fund personal debts, financial instability, erratic behavior. I looked up at the clerk. She was watching me, her gaze softer now, perhaps seeing the shock plainly written on my face. "This is a lie," I said, my voice sounding thin in the high-ceilinged room. "I lost my job 2 weeks before he died. That is not financial instability. That is life. And erratic, I have been handling his funeral arrangements while she went on vacation." The clerk leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. "Honey, these are public records, but usually, people do not read the attachments until the hearing." She glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then tapped a finger on the paragraph about my behavior. "That language," she murmured, "that is boilerplate for a competency challenge. If they can prove you are unfit or unstable, they can petition to put your share into a managed trust. You would not see a dime of it directly. You would have to ask her permission to buy groceries." The room spun. A managed trust. It wasn't just about taking the money. It was about taking my autonomy. It was about making me a child again, with Tessa as the parent. "Thank you," I whispered. I took the copies and walked out into the bright, blinding sunlight of the plaza. I felt sick. This was not just a sisterly spat. This was an assassination of my character, filed in triplicate with the county. I walked 4 blocks to the police station, the same one where I had been processed the day before. The walk gave me time to let the shock harden into something colder, something useful. I requested a copy of the stolen vehicle report at the front desk. The officer on duty was a heavy-set man who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. He handed me the printout without looking me in the eye. I scanned it right there in the lobby. Reporting party Tessa Caldwell. Relationship sister/administrator. Narrative suspect took vehicle without authorization. Suspect has refused multiple requests to return property. Refused multiple requests. She hadn't asked me for the car once. Not a text, not a call, not a whisper at Sunday dinner. I looked at the officer. "This is a false report," I said, holding up the paper. "She never asked for the car. I have been driving it for 3 years. Filing a false police report is a crime, isn't it?" The officer sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Technically, yes," he said. "But look, Ms. Patterson, I see this all the time. Mom or dad dies. The kids start fighting over the silver in the sedans. It gets ugly. But unless you have proof she knew it was false, like a text where she gave you permission and then lied about it, it is he said she said. It is not he said she said. I insisted. It is a lie used to intimidate me. It is a civil matter wrapped in a criminal report, he said, his tone final. We acted on the report as it was filed. If you want to contest the ownership, take it to probate court. The police are not referees for inheritance fights. I walked out, clutching the paperwork. He was right. To the law. This was just noise. To me, it was a noose tightening. I needed to see her. I shouldn't have gone. Marin would have told me not to go. Any lawyer would have told me to stay away. But the rage was a living thing in my chest, demanding an outlet. I spent $40 on a cab to Alder Heights. It was the part of town where the lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives and the driveways were paved with crushed stone. Tessa lived in a condo complex that looked like a Tuscan villa dropped into the American Midwest. I buzzed her gate code. No answer. I buzzed it again. Finally, her voice crackled over the intercom. Who is it? It is Naomi. I said, let me in. Tessa. There was a long silence. For a moment, I thought she would leave me standing there. Then, the gate clicked and swung open with a slow, heavy groan. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Tessa was waiting in her doorway. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and yoga pants, looking effortlessly put together. Her face was composed, but her eyes were darting around the hallway, checking for neighbors. Naomi, she said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You shouldn't be here. You are upset. Upset? I laughed. A short, sharp sound that echoed in the corridor. You had me arrested. Tessa, you had men point guns at me on the side of the road. Come inside, she hissed, grabbing my arm and pulling me into her foyer. She shut the door quickly, locking the deadbolt. Her apartment smelled of vanilla and expensive lilies. It was perfect, pristine. Everything was white or beige, untouched by the messiness of real life. I pulled my arm away from her grip. Why, I asked. Just tell me why. Tessa walked into the living room and sat on the edge of her white sofa, wrapping her arms around herself. She looked small, fragile. It was a pose I recognized from our childhood. The I didn't mean to break it pose. I was worried about you, she said, looking up at me with wide, watery eyes. You have been so distinct lately, withdrawn. And when I saw the bank accounts, what about the bank accounts, I asked? They were draining so fast. Naomi, Dad's liquid cash. I panicked. I have a fiduciary duty to protect the estate. I froze. Fiduciary duty. Tessa didn't know what a fiduciary was. Tessa was a graphic designer who thought balancing a checkbook was an oppressive chore. She had never used that phrase in her life. Dad left the money to us, I said slowly. And I haven't touched the estate accounts because I couldn't. You know I couldn't. I was afraid you would run off, she continued, the words tumbling out faster now. I was afraid you would take the car and just leave. You have been so unstable since the layoff. I did it for Dad's wishes. He wouldn't want you to squander everything on whatever you are going through. I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking slightly past my shoulder, reciting, unstable, squander, fiduciary duty, assets. Who are you talking to, I asked. What? She blinked, looking confused. Who is coaching you? I stepped closer. You did not come up with fiduciary duty on your own, and you certainly didn't come up with the idea to file a stolen vehicle report to establish a pattern of erratic behavior. Who is helping you? I am the administrator. She snapped, her mask of concern slipping for a split second to reveal the steel beneath. I have advisors, professional advisors. So you admit it. I said, you are paying someone to help you steal my half. I am paying for legal counsel to ensure the estate is managed correctly, she shouted, standing up. And if you are going to come here and harass me, I will call the police again. And this time, with the report already on file. They won't just let you go. The threat hung in the air, cold and absolute. I looked at my sister, the sister I had shared a bunk bed with, the sister I had held when her first boyfriend dumped her. She was gone. In her place was a terrified, greedy stranger armed with legal buzzwords she barely understood. "You are going to lose. Tessa," I said quietly. "I don't know who is pulling your strings, but you are going to lose." I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it softly, sealing the tomb behind me. I called Maren from the sidewalk. Maren Klein had been 2 years ahead of me in college. She had been the kind of student who highlighted her textbooks in 4 different colors and corrected the professors. Now, she was a civil litigator with a reputation for being aggressive, expensive, and honest. I sat in her office an hour later. It wasn't fancy like the Holloway Reese offices. It was cluttered, smelling of coffee and dry erase markers. Maren listened to me for 20 minutes without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she sat back and capped her pen. "Okay," she said. "Here's the bad news. They are winning." I felt a lump form in my throat. "They have established the narrative," she explained, ticking points off on her fingers. "You are financially desperate because of the layoff. 2. You are erratic, evidenced by the theft of the car. 3. They have temporary control of the assets and the information. Possession is 9/10 of the law, Naomi, but in probate, it is 10/10 until a judge says otherwise. So what do we do?" I asked. "We stop bleeding," she said sharply. "First, you stop reacting. No more visits to her condo. No more screaming on the phone. If you yell, you are unstable. If you cry, you are hysterical. If you confront her, you are harassing. You need to be a block of ice." She leaned forward. "This fight is going to be about documents, credibility, and timing. We need to prove that Tessa is not acting in the interest of the estate, but in her own self-interest, and we need to find out who is feeding her the strategy. Because you are right, Tessa didn't think of this. This is a playbook." She tapped the police report I had placed on her desk. "Preserve everything. Texts, emails, voicemails, and get to the bank. Did your father have a safety deposit box?" "Yes," I said. "At Bay Ridge Community. Go there." Maren said, "Today, right now. If there is a will or a trust amendment in there, we need it. If Tessa hasn't cleared it out yet, that box is the only place the lawyers can't touch without a specific court order or a key." I stood up, and Naomi Maren said, her voice softening just a fraction, "Do not let them make you crazy. That is the goal. If they make you crazy, they win." I took another cab to Bay Ridge Community Bank. It was a small branch, the kind with carpet that hadn't been changed since 1990, and a jar of lollipops at the teller window. My father had banked here for 30 years. I knew the layout by heart. I walked straight to the desk where the safety deposit box coordinator sat. "Hello," I said, trying to project the icy calm Maren had ordered. "My name is Naomi Patterson. My father, David Patterson, had a box here, box 402. I am a co-signer on the account. I need to access it." The woman at the desk typed in the name. She frowned. "I am sorry. Ms. Patterson." "That box was accessed yesterday." "Accessed," I asked. "By whom?" "By the administrator of the estate," she said. "Tessa Caldwell. And, let me see, she had a gentleman with her." My heart sank. Yesterday. Again. Everything happened yesterday. "Did she close the box?" I asked. "No," the woman said, "but the access log shows they were in the viewing room for 45 minutes. I need to see the log." I said, "I cannot show you that without a subpoena." She said apologetically. I walked away from the desk, feeling the walls closing in. She had been there. She had taken whatever was inside. I was chasing a ghost. "Naomi." I turned. Standing near the break room door was Julie. We had gone to high school together. She was wearing the bank's navy blue blazer, holding a stack of files. "Julie," I breathed. She looked around quickly, then motioned for me to follow her into a small side corridor near the restrooms. It was away from the cameras. "I heard you were here." she whispered. I am so sorry about your dad. Julie, I said, grabbing her hand. Tessa was here yesterday. Did you see her? I saw her, Julie said, her voice barely audible. Naomi, you need to be careful. What do you mean? Yesterday, before Tessa came in, we got a request from corporate. Someone asked for a pull of your signature card. My signature card. The card I signed when I opened my account 10 years ago. Yes, Julie said. The digital scan. And not just yours. Your dad's too. From, 20 years ago. Why, I asked. My skin prickling. Why would they need my old signature? Julie squeezed my hand, her eyes wide with concern. In banking, we usually only see that when someone is trying to verify a signature or practice one. The world tilted. Practice one. Forgery. They weren't just locking me out. They were creating documents. If they had my signature, and Dad's signature, they could manufacture anything. A waiver, a new will, a transfer of funds. Who requested it? I asked. I couldn't see the source code, Julie said, but it came through the priority legal channel. Usually, that is for subpoenas. But there was no subpoena on file. It was just authorized. Someone with power. Someone who knew the banking system better than a suburban estate lawyer. Go, Julie said, pushing me gently back toward the lobby. If my manager sees me talking to you, I could get fired. But Naomi, check everything. I walked out of the bank into the late afternoon sun. The light was orange and heavy, casting long shadows that looked like bars across the pavement. I went home. The apartment felt empty, silent. I locked the door and slid the deadbolt. Then I wedged a chair under the handle. It was irrational. Maybe. But I didn't feel safe. I sat on my floor, surrounded by the few papers I had, the police report, the petition, practice one. The words echoed in my head. I pulled out my phone. I needed to hear his voice. I needed to remember that he was real, that he loved me, that this nightmare wasn't his legacy. I scrolled through my voicemails. I had saved every message he sent me for the last 5 years. Happy birthday. Kiddo, call me when you land. I made too much chili. Come get some. I scrolled all the way to the bottom, to the oldest saved messages. There was one from 4 years ago. The date was April 12th. I didn't remember it. I pressed play. Hey, Naomi. It's Dad. Listen, I am at the house. I was just going through some of the old files in the study. I put a letter in the blue folder. You know the one. The blue folder with the leather strap. I am not going to file it with the lawyers because, well, you know how lawyers are. They charge you $1,000 just to read a page. But if anything happens, look in the blue folder. It covers the other thing. Okay. Love you. Kiddo. The message ended. I sat there. The phone pressed to my ear. The silence of the room rushing back in. The letter in the blue folder. The other thing. I closed my eyes, searching my memory. Dad's study. The messy desk. He had piles of folders. Red ones for bills. Manila ones for medical stuff. Blue. I remembered a blue accordion folder. He used to keep it on the top shelf of the closet in the guest room, tucked behind the winter blankets. He called it his doomsday file. It was where he kept the deed to the house, our birth certificates, the social security cards. If Tessa was clearing out the house, if she was the administrator, she would have found it, or she would be looking for it. But the voicemail, I am not going to file it with the lawyers. That meant Holloway Reese didn't have it. That meant Tessa might not know it exists, unless she found it. I stood up, adrenaline flooding my system, chasing away the fatigue. The police report said Tessa had reported the car stolen to prevent me from liquidating assets, but maybe that wasn't the real reason. Maybe she knew about the blue folder. Maybe she was tearing the house apart looking for it. And maybe she locked me out, took the car, and threatened me to keep me away from the house while she searched. The other thing, my father had a secret he didn't trust lawyers with. And right now, that secret was sitting in a blue folder, somewhere in a house I was legally forbidden to enter. I looked at the window. The sun had set. I couldn't go to the house. If I went there, Tessa would call the police. I would go to jail. But I knew something she didn't know. I knew what to look for. I dialed Marin. I found something. I said when she answered. Good or bad, Marin asked. I don't know yet. I said, but Dad left a breadcrumb, a blue folder, and Marin, I think that is what they are afraid of. We need to get it, Marin said. I know. I said, but I can't go to the house. No, Marin said. You can't, but we can compel them to produce an inventory. If we file the right motion, we can force a third-party inspection of the property. It will take too long. I said, if Tessa finds it first, she will destroy it. Then we have to hope, Marin said, that your father hid it well. I hung up. I looked at the dark screen of my phone. Practice 1. They were practicing his signature, which meant they needed to fake something, which meant the original, the real will. Or the real instruction was missing or didn't say what they wanted it to say. The blue folder held the truth, and I was going to find it. Even if I had to tear the estate apart brick by brick. I went to the kitchen and made a pot of coffee. I wasn't going to sleep tonight. I pulled the laptop toward me and opened a fresh document. Timeline of events. I started typing. The police stop. The portal lockout. The bank access. The signature card request. I was building my own case now. And for the first time since the lights flashed in my rearview mirror, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a hunter. The printer in Marin's office had a rhythmic, grinding hum that sounded like teeth gnashing together. I watched as page after page slid into the tray, each one a weapon we were about to fire back at my sister. This is the emergency motion, Marin said, snatching the stack from the tray and squaring it on her desk. She didn't look tired. Even though we had been working for 6 hours straight, she looked sharpened. We are filing ex parte. That means we go before the judge without Tessa there. Initially, we are arguing that her appointment as temporary administrator was obtained through omission of material facts and that she has an active conflict of interest. She slid a paper across the desk. It was the draft of our argument. The petitioner, Tessa Caldwell, has weaponized her fiduciary authority to harass the beneficiary, filing a false police report regarding a vehicle she knew was in the beneficiary's lawful possession for 3 years. This action demonstrates not only a lack of impartiality, but a malicious intent to manufacture grounds for disinheritance. It looked so clinical on paper. Malicious intent. In my head, it was just Tessa screaming at me when we were 12. But this wasn't 12. This was felony-level manipulation. We are attaching the police report as Exhibit A, Marin continued, and the affidavit from you stating she never requested the return of the keys. We are painting a picture. Naomi, Tessa isn't the grieving daughter trying to protect the estate. She is a hostile actor using the probate court as a sword. I signed the verification page, my pen scratching loudly in the quiet office. What happens if the judge believes her, I asked. Then we fight the long war. Marin said, but right now, we just need to stop the bleeding. We need to freeze her powers before she moves any more money. I left Marin's office with a task list that felt more like a detective's log than a beneficiary's duty. I needed to keep digging. Marin handled the court. I handled the history. I sat in my car, a rental I had paid for with a credit card I couldn't afford to max out, and dialed Holloway and Reese again. I wasn't going to let the receptionist gatekeep me this time. I needed to know why they were helping her. Holloway and Reese, legal department. This is Naomi Patterson, I said, pitching my voice lower, trying to sound like the kind of woman who sued people for fun. I am calling to confirm receipt of the correspondence sent to my sister regarding the estate settlement. I was bluffing. I didn't know if there was correspondence. I was fishing in the dark. There was a pause. The typing sound on the other end was frantic. One moment. Ms. Patterson. The receptionist said, I see the log here. Yes. The revised family settlement proposal was sent to Ms. Caldwell via courier 3 weeks ago. We are still awaiting the executed signature pages from the beneficiaries. I froze. The phone felt slippery in my hand. 3 weeks ago, I asked, keeping my voice steady, a settlement proposal. Yes, the receptionist said, sounding bored now. The proposal outlining the asset restructuring. It was sent to Ms. Caldwell to distribute to you for review. Did you not receive your copy? No. I said, I certainly did not. Oh, she said. There was a pause, and then her tone shifted, becoming suddenly guarded. Well, as Ms. Caldwell is the primary point of contact, we rely on her to disseminate the drafts. I cannot send you a duplicate without Mr. Holloway's approval. She hung up before I could argue. I sat in the rental car, the engine idling, a settlement proposal. 3 weeks ago. That was before Dad's funeral service had even been fully paid for. That was before the police stop. That was before the bank accounts were locked. Tessa had received a document outlining how to split the money, and instead of showing it to me, she had launched a campaign to prove I was unstable. Why? The answer was simple, and it made my blood run cold. The proposal must have been fair. If the proposal gave me 50% and Tessa wanted 100%, she couldn't show it to me. She had to bury it. She had to make sure that by the time a judge looked at the estate, I was deemed unfit to sign anything. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Marin. Got the metadata from the trust portal. Call me. I dialed her back immediately. You were right, Marin said without preamble. The password reset on your father's trust portal wasn't a glitch. It was a manual reset request. Where did it come from, I asked. The IP address traces back to a commercial server. Marin said, specifically, the Nexus co-working space in Alder Heights. Alder Heights, that was Tessa's neighborhood. She lived 3 streets away from the Nexus building. But here's the kicker. Naomi. Marin said, the reset happened at 4:15 in the afternoon on Tuesday. I looked at my notebook where I had written my timeline. Tuesday at 4 o'clock was exactly when the police cruiser lit me up. It was coordinated. At 4 o'clock, the police stop me, ensuring I am distracted, terrified, and physically detained. At 4:15, while I am handcuffed on the side of the road, someone sits down at a computer in Alder Heights and locks me out of the money. It wasn't just Tessa. Tessa couldn't be in 2 places at once. If she was at home, worrying about me, she wasn't at a co-working space hacking a trust account, and she certainly wasn't savvy enough to coordinate a police interdiction with a cyber lockout. This is a professional hit. I said to Marin, it looks like it. Marin agreed. We are adding this to the motion. It proves malice. It proves conspiracy. But Naomi, we need to know who she is working with. Tessa isn't smart enough to be this evil on her own. I hung up and looked at the timeline in my notebook. Stolen car report, Tuesday morning. Police stop Tuesday, 4 o'clock p.m. Trust lockout Tuesday, 4:15 p.m. Administrator petition Wednesday morning, 24 hours. They had dismantled my entire life in one rotation of the earth. I needed an ally. I needed someone from the family who wasn't Tessa. I thought of Uncle Grant. Grant Patterson was my father's younger brother. He was a retired insurance adjuster who lived in a bungalow on the south side of town. He had always been the peacemaker, the one who bought us ice cream when Dad was being too strict. He had hugged me at the funeral and told me to call him if I needed anything. I dialed his number. Grant. It's Naomi. Naomi, he said. His voice sounded tight, strained. I heard you had some trouble with the police. News travels fast, I said. It wasn't trouble. Grant, Tessa filed a false report. She is trying to lock me out of the estate. There was a long silence on the line. I could hear the faint tick-tock of the grandfather clock in his hallway. Naomi. Listen to me, he said finally. You need to let it go. Excuse me, I asked. The family needs stability right now, he said. The words came out in a rush, flat and monotone. Tessa is just trying to make sure everything is handled legally. You know how you get emotional. It is better to let the professionals handle the administration. You will get your share eventually. Just stop fighting her. Grant, I said, my voice rising. She had me arrested. She is forging signatures. Let it go. Naomi, he repeated. Same inflection, same cadence. For the good of the legacy. He hung up. I stared at the phone. For the good of the legacy. Uncle Grant didn't talk like that. Uncle Grant talked about baseball scores and the price of gas. I put the car in gear. I wasn't going to let that slide. I drove to his house. It was a 30-minute drive, and I spent every minute of it rehearsing what I would say. I pulled into his driveway. His car was there. I banged on the front door. "Grant, open up." He opened the door a crack, leaving the chain on. He looked pale. He looked old. "Naomi, you shouldn't be here," he whispered. "Why are you reading a script?" "Grant," I demanded, "why did you tell me to let it go?" "I'm just looking out for you," he said, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. He kept glancing back toward his living room. "Let me in." I said. "I can't," he said. I pushed against the door. And for a second, I saw past him, through the crack. I could see his small writing desk in the foyer. There was a document sitting on the blotter. It was thick, bound with a staple in the corner, but what caught my eye was the letterhead, a heavy cream-colored paper with a navy blue logo at the top, Holloway Reese Legal Group. And sitting right on top of it was a check, a cashier's check. I couldn't read the amount, but I could see the distinct watermark of the bank. Grant followed my gaze. He slammed the door shut. I stood on the porch, my knuckles hovering inches from the wood. He was on the payroll. My father's brother, the man who taught me how to fish. They had bought him, or maybe they had scared him, for the good of the legacy. I walked back to my car, my legs feeling heavy, like I was wading through wet concrete. The circle of trust had shrunk to a dot. It was just me and Marin. I sat in the driver's seat, resting my forehead against the steering wheel. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream until my throat bled, but I couldn't. Crying was what the unstable Naomi would do. My phone chimed. I ignored it. It chimed again. I picked it up, expecting another lecture from a relative or a bill collector. It was an email. Sender Truthseeker, 402@protonmail.com. Subject urgent. I opened it. The body of the email was in all caps. Check your dad's storage unit before it's cleared. They are moving fast. Attached was a blurry photo. It showed a padlock on a roll-up metal door. The number on the door was B114, and below the photo was an address for Harbor Lock Storage. I stared at the screen. Who was Truthseeker 402402? That was my dad's safety deposit box number. Was it Julie from the bank, or the paralegal Marin mentioned? It didn't matter. The warning was clear. Before it's cleared, I threw the car into reverse. Harbor Lock Storage was on the industrial edge of town, near the docks. It was a 40-minute drive. I made it in 25. The facility was a sprawling maze of orange metal doors and concrete. I ran into the main office. The manager was a guy with grease under his fingernails and a name tag that said, "Rick. I need to access Unit B114. I said, breathless, "My name is Naomi Patterson. My father, David Patterson, is the owner." Rick tapped on his keyboard. "David Patterson," he muttered. "Yeah, passed away. Right. Sorry for your loss. I need to get in." I said, "Well, you are not on the list," he said. What I asked. "I have been on the list for years. The list was updated yesterday," Rick said, turning the screen so I could see it. Primary owner. Estate of David Patterson. Authorized user Tessa Caldwell. She had been here, just like the bank. She was systematically hitting every location where my father might have hidden a piece of paper. "Rick," I said, leaning over the counter. "My father died 3 months ago. If that list was updated yesterday, it was done by the administrator. But I am his daughter, if there is property in there that belongs to the family. I have a right to ensure it is safe. Please, just let me check that the lock hasn't been cut." Rick looked at me. He looked at the desperation in my eyes. He looked at the clock. "I can't give you a key," he said. "But I have to do a perimeter check of the B block anyway. If you happen to walk with me, and if the door happens to be unlocked—" "Thank you," I whispered. We walked down the long, echoing corridor. The air smelled of dust and damp concrete. My footsteps sounded like gunshots in the silence. We reached Unit B114. The padlock was there. It looked new, shiny. Rick tugged on it. It held fast. "Looks locked," he said. I stared at the lock. It wasn't my father's old combination lock. It was a keyed master lock. Tessa had changed it. "Rick," I said, "Do you have the master key? I can't use the master unless there is an emergency," he said. I pulled up the email on my phone and showed him the photo. "This was sent to me 10 minutes ago." I lied. "Someone told me there is a water leak in this unit. If my dad's antiques are ruined, the estate will sue the facility for negligence." Rick paled. Water leaks were the enemy of storage units. He didn't ask to see the timestamp. He fumbled for his keyring. "I will just take a quick peek," he muttered. He slid the master key in. The lock clicked. He rolled the metal door up. The sound was a deafening rattle. The unit was illuminated by the fluorescent light from the hallway. I stepped inside. My father had been a hoarder of memories. I expected chaos. I expected piles of old magazines, broken furniture, boxes of tax returns from 1995. Instead, the unit was terrifyingly organized. Cardboard boxes were stacked in precise towers against the walls. Each box was labeled in sharp, black marker, but not in my father's scrawl, in block letters. Financial. 2010 to 2020, personal correspondence property. Deeds. Someone had been here. Someone had gone through everything. This wasn't a storage unit anymore. It was a crime scene that had been cleaned. I frantically began tearing the lids off the boxes. Rick stood at the door, shifting nervously. "You can't rummage. Ma'am, just check for the leak." I ignored him. I ripped open the box labeled personal correspondence. It was empty. I opened the next one, property deeds. Empty. They were just shells. They had taken the contents and left the boxes to make it look full. I spun around, scanning the shelves. Where was the chaos? Where were the things that didn't fit in boxes in the back corner? On a metal rack. I saw a stack of old vinyl records, and wedged behind them, almost invisible, was a plastic bin filled with loose papers. The junk bin, the stuff the cleaners deemed irrelevant. I ran to it. I dumped the bin onto the concrete floor. Old receipts, manuals for toaster ovens, birthday cards. I sifted through the pile, my hands shaking. Blue folder, blue folder. I saw a flash of blue. I grabbed it. It wasn't a folder. It was just a piece of cardstock, a back cover. The rest of it had been ripped away. I held the fragment up to the light. It was the back panel of a blue accordion file. The kind you buy at an office supply store and stuck to the bottom corner. Caught under a piece of clear tape was a small, torn triangle of white paper. I peered at it. There was writing on it, just 3 words, written in blue ink. For Naomi. Do not, that was it. For Naomi. Do not, what do not file? Do not show Tessa. I looked at the jagged edge of the paper. It had been torn in a hurry. Tessa, or whoever she sent, had found the blue folder. They had realized what it was, and they had destroyed it. They had ripped the contents out and left the trash. But they had been sloppy. They had missed this one scrap. I clutched the piece of blue cardboard to my chest. Ma'am, Rick called out. "No water. We gotta go." I walked out of the unit. I felt cold. Not the cold of fear, but the cold of absolute, 0-degree clarity. I had spent the last 2 days thinking this was about money. I thought Tessa was just greedy. I thought she wanted a bigger slice of the pie. I was wrong. You don't purge a storage unit like this for money. You don't buy off an uncle for money. You don't coordinate a police takedown for money. You do it to hide a crime. My father didn't just leave a will. He left evidence. The letter in the blue folder wasn't just an addendum. It was a smoking gun. And they had just tried to incinerate it. I walked past Rick, clutching the scrap of cardboard like it was a diamond. I wasn't the unstable little sister anymore. I wasn't the victim. I was the only witness left. I got back into my car and locked the doors. I placed the blue cardboard on the passenger seat and took a picture of it. Then I sent it to Marin. They got the folder. I typed, "But I found a piece. They are scrubbing him. Marin. They are erasing his life." I looked at the text. Then I typed one more line. "I am ready to stop playing defense." I started the engine. The sun had fully set now, plunging the industrial park into shadow. But I could see the road ahead perfectly. I knew where I had to go next. If they were watching the storage unit, if they were watching the bank, if they were watching the house, Then I needed to find the one person they weren't watching, the man in the photo with Tessa, the consultant. If I couldn't find the documents, I would find the man who stole them. The video footage on Marin's computer monitor was grainy, rendered in the stark, high-contrast black and white of cheap security cameras. I leaned in, the smell of Marin's stale office coffee sharp in my nose, watching the timestamp in the corner of the screen tick forward. Tuesday, 2:14 in the afternoon. That was exactly 1 hour and 46 minutes before the police lights had flashed in my rearview mirror. "There," Marin said, pointing a pen at the screen. A car pulled into the frame outside Unit B114. It wasn't Tessa's white SUV. It was a black sedan, sleek and expensive, the kind of car that looked out of place among the rusted pickup trucks and moving vans usually parked at Harbor Lock. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a long coat and a fedora that obscured his face from the overhead camera. He moved with a stiff, efficient posture. He walked around to the passenger side and opened the door. Tessa stepped out. She looked nervous even in the pixelated footage. She was hugging her purse to her chest. Glancing over her shoulder, the man said something to her. I could tell by the way he turned his head, and she nodded. He walked to the trunk and popped it. He pulled out a large leather briefcase. Not a tool bag, a briefcase. "He has a key," I whispered, on the screen. The man walked up to the roll-up door of my father's unit. He didn't fumble. He didn't check a piece of paper. He slid a key into the padlock, snapped it open, and rolled the door up. They were inside for 42 minutes. When they came out, the man was carrying the briefcase, but it looked heavier now. He held it with both hands. Tessa was carrying a single cardboard box. They put the items in the trunk. The man locked the unit with a new padlock, the one I had seen yesterday, and they drove away. "Who is he?" Marin asked. "Do you recognize him? Is he a family friend?" "A cousin," I shook my head, squinting at the screen. "Pause it when he turns toward the camera." Marin tapped the spacebar. The image froze. The man was blurry, but the lower half of his face was visible. He had a strong jaw, gray stubble, and he was wearing a scarf tucked neatly into his coat. "I don't know him," I said, "but he isn't a mover, and he isn't a locksmith." I pulled out my phone. I took a picture of the frozen screen, zooming in on the man's face. "I am going to find him," I said. I spent the next 3 hours in a coffee shop down the street, my laptop open, fueled by a caffeine jitter that felt like panic vibrating under my skin. I started with the website for Holloway and Reese. I scanned their Our Team page. Nothing, just a sea of smiling, diversity hired associates and the grim, stony faces of the partners. I went to the news and events section. I scrolled back 6 months. Holloway and Reese sponsors annual Merrow County Charity Gala. There was a gallery of photos. Lawyers holding champagne flutes. Lawyers shaking hands with the mayor. I clicked through 50 photos, then 60, and then I stopped. Photo number 72. It was a candid shot near the buffet line. Lyle Holloway, the senior partner, was laughing, his hand on the shoulder of a man in a tuxedo. The man was older. He had the same strong jaw, the same gray stubble. The caption read, "Senior partner Lyle Holloway shares a laugh with security consultant Bennett Sloan." Bennett Sloan. I opened a new tab and typed the name, Bennett Sloan Associates, Private Investigations and Asset Recovery. His website was sparse, dark blue background, gold text, discretion, results, complex litigation support. He wasn't just a consultant. He was a fixer. He was the guy you hired when you needed to find dirt, or hide dirt, or break into a storage unit and sanitize it before the other side knew it existed. Tessa didn't hire him. Tessa hired the lawyers. The lawyers hired him. I slammed my laptop shut. The noise made the barista jump. I drove straight to the glass and steel tower that housed Holloway and Reese. I didn't call Marin. I knew she would tell me to wait, to file a motion, to be strategic, but I was done with strategy. I wanted them to know that I saw them. I walked past the receptionist before she could even reach for her headset. I knew where Lyle Holloway's office was. I had been there for the reading of the will. "Ms. Patterson," the receptionist shouted, scrambling out of her chair. "You can't go back there." I pushed open the heavy oak doors to the conference suite. Lyle Holloway was standing in the hallway, reviewing a file with a junior associate. He looked up, his expression shifting from annoyance to a practiced, oily calm. "Naomi," he said smoothly, "we have security protocols. You know, you can't just barge in here." I held up my phone, the screen displaying the photo of him and Bennett Sloan. "Who is Bennett Sloan?" I asked. Lyle didn't blink. He didn't flush. He just handed the file to the associate and nodded for her to leave. "Bennett is an independent contractor we occasionally use for specialized tasks," Lyle said. "Why?" "Because I have video footage of him entering my father's storage unit with my sister yesterday," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "I have footage of him removing documents, and I know he works for you." Lyle sighed, adjusting his cufflinks. He looked at me with a pitying expression, like I was a child who had dropped her ice cream. "Naomi, estates with high conflict often require due diligence. We have a duty to secure assets. If Ms. Caldwell requested Mr. Sloan's assistance to inventory the storage unit, that is entirely within her rights as administrator. He stole the blue folder." I said, "You sent him to steal it because you know it changes the will." Lyle stepped closer. His cologne smelled of sandalwood and money. "That is a very serious accusation, Naomi, and it sounds like the kind of paranoid theory that got you into trouble with the police on Tuesday." The threat was subtle, but it hit me like a physical slap. He was using the police stop the one they orchestrated as proof that I was crazy. "I am not paranoid, Lyle," I said, stepping into his space. "I am a witness, and I'm going to report you to the Bar Association." Lyle smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I suggest you leave, Naomi, before you embarrass yourself further." I turned and walked out, my heels clicking loudly on the marble floor. I was shaking, but not from fear, from hatred. By the time I got back to Marin's office, the war had escalated. Marin was on the phone, her face pale. She slammed the receiver down when I walked in. "What did you do?" she asked. "I confronted him," I said. "I told him I knew about Bennett Sloan." Marin groaned, putting her head in her hands. "Naomi, I told you to wait. They just faxed over a cease and desist, and a warning letter regarding defamation." She slid a paper across the desk. "Re-harassment of legal counsel. We demand that Ms. Patterson immediately cease making unfounded criminal accusations against this firm and its associates. Further slanderous statements will result in immediate civil litigation for damages. Let them sue me." I said, "It is not just the letter." Marin said, "Look at Facebook." I frowned. I didn't use Facebook much, but I pulled out my phone and opened the app. I had 3 notifications, all from a post by Mrs. Gable, the neighbor who had watched me get arrested. So heartbroken to hear about the struggles the Patterson family is going through. Addiction is a terrible disease, and grief makes people do desperate things. Praying for Naomi to find the help she needs before she hurts herself or others. #family. First hashtag, intervention. My mouth fell open. Addiction. I scrolled down. There were comments. "Oh no, is that why the police were there? I heard she was stealing from her sister. So sad. She seemed so normal. They were planting it. They were seeding the ground. It wasn't enough to make me look irresponsible. They had to make me look like a junkie." Erratic behavior was too vague. Addiction was a story everyone understood. It explained the lost job. It explained the stolen car. It explained why I couldn't be trusted with money. "This is Tessa," I whispered. "She told Mrs. Gable. She cried on her shoulder and told her I was on drugs." "It is a whisper campaign," Marin said grimly. "It is designed to isolate you. By the time we get to court, half the town will believe you are checking into rehab." I felt a wave of nausea. This was my life. These were people I had known since kindergarten. "We need to counter it," Marin said. "We need affidavits, character witnesses, people who know you are sober, steady, and employed, or at least, employable." So, for the next 2 days, I underwent the most humiliating experience of my life. I had to call my former landlord, Mr. Henderson, and ask him to sign a legal document stating that I paid my rent on time and didn't have drug dealers visiting my apartment. I had to call my old supervisor, Sarah, who had laid me off, and ask her to vouch for my mental stability. Naomi, Sarah asked, her voice awkward. Is everything okay? I saw a post online. It is not true. Sarah, I said, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. It is a lie. I just need you to tell the truth. That I was a good project manager. That I was reliable. I gathered 5 affidavits, 5 sheets of paper that proved I was a human being worth believing. It felt pathetic. It felt necessary. But affidavits wouldn't win the war. They would just keep me in the game, to win. I needed the document Bennett Sloan had stolen, or a copy of it. I lay in bed on Friday night, staring at the ceiling, the letter in the blue folder. Dad said in the voicemail, I'm not going to file it with the lawyers. He had written it himself. My father was old school, but he was modern enough to use a computer. He typed everything. He didn't handwrite long documents because his arthritis bothered him. If he typed the letter, he typed it on something. His desktop computer in the study had been wiped. Tessa had donated it to a charity 2 weeks after the funeral. I remembered being annoyed at the time, but now I knew it was part of the purge. But Dad had a laptop, an old clunky Dell he used to take on fishing trips to check the weather and email his buddies. Where was the laptop? It wasn't in the study. I closed my eyes, trying to visualize the house, the garage. No, the attic. Then I remembered. Mom's house. My parents had divorced 15 years ago, but they had remained friends, oddly close friends. When Dad got sick, he spent a few weekends at Mom's place because it was a single story and easier for him to navigate than his own colonial. He might have left the laptop there. My mother was currently in an assisted living facility in Florida. Her dementia had advanced rapidly in the last year, but her house in Briar Glen was still sitting there, maintained by a landscaping crew, waiting to be sold. I still had a key. I drove there at midnight. I didn't want the neighbors to see me. I parked 2 streets over and walked through the backyards, feeling like the criminal they accused me of being. The house smelled of stale air and lavender. I used the flashlight on my phone, keeping the beam low. I went to the guest room where Dad used to stay. The closet was empty. The dresser was empty. I checked under the bed. Nothing. I sat on the mattress, fighting back tears. It was a dead end. Then I looked at the nightstand. There was a stack of old Reader's Digest magazines, and underneath the bottom magazine, wedged between the paper and the wood, was a sliver of silver plastic. I shoved the magazines aside. The Dell laptop. I pulled it out. It was heavy, covered in a thin film of dust. I opened the lid. I pressed the power button. Nothing. Battery dead. I scrambled around the room looking for a charger. I found one in the tangled mess of cords in the junk drawer in the kitchen. I plugged it in. The orange charging light blinked. I waited 5 minutes. Then I pressed the power button again. The screen flickered to life. The Windows logo appeared. No password. Dad never used passwords on his personal machines. The desktop was cluttered with icons, fishing maps, recipes, photos. I opened the File Explorer. I went to Documents. There were hundreds of files. I used the search bar. I typed blue, nothing. I typed letter. Hundreds of results. Letter to editor. Letter to Aunt Marge. I typed Tessa. Nothing. I typed Naomi. A folder appeared. Naomi_college. Old photos. I sat back, frustration clawing at my throat. Maybe he didn't save it. Maybe he typed it, printed it, and deleted it. Then I noticed a folder on the desktop labeled Scans. I opened it. Most of it was boring. Insurance card 2022. Driver license. But at the bottom of the list, dated April 12th, the same date as the voicemail, was a file. BF_scan_do not file. PDF BF. Blue folder. My hand hovered over the trackpad. I double-clicked. The document opened. It was a scan of a signed letter. My father's signature was at the bottom, shaky but distinct. I read the text. Addendum to estate distribution and trust instructions. I, David Patterson, being of sound mind, Do hereby clarify my intentions regarding the distribution of my assets. While the general estate is to be divided equally, I am aware of the tensions regarding the commercial property located at 4400 River Road. River Road. That was the old warehouse Dad had bought in the 80s. It was a dump. We always joked about it being his money pit. This property has recently been appraised for rezoning development, with a projected value significantly higher than the current tax assessment. I blinked. Rezoning. That meant it wasn't a dump. It was a gold mine. If a developer wanted it for condos or a strip mall, it could be worth millions. It is my wish that the River Road property be deeded exclusively to my daughter, Naomi Patterson, provided that she demonstrates the capability to manage the asset. And then, the kicker, the paragraph that explained everything. However, should Naomi Patterson be incapacitated, incarcerated, or deemed legally incompetent due to substance abuse or mental instability at the time of probate closing, this asset shall revert to the general estate to be administered by Tessa Caldwell. I stared at the screen until the words blurred: incapacitated, incarcerated, incompetent, substance abuse. That was the clause. That was why they did it. They didn't just hate me, they needed me to fail that specific condition. If I was just a normal beneficiary, I got the warehouse, I got the millions. But if I was an addict, if I was a criminal with a stolen car report on my record, if I was unstable, then Tessa got it all. The warehouse, the development deal, the fortune. It wasn't about 50-50, it was about cutting me out of the windfall. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the screen. Then I emailed the file to myself. Then I emailed it to Marin. Then I saved it to a USB drive I found in the laptop bag. I sat in the dark house, the blue light of the screen illuminating my face. They knew about this letter. Bennett Sloan had found the original in the storage unit and destroyed it. They thought the evidence was gone. They didn't know Dad had scanned it. I called Marin. It was 2 a.m. Pick up, pick up, pick up, she answered, her voice groggy. Naomi. Are you okay? I found it. I said, I found the motive. I explained the River Road property. I explained the clause about substance abuse and incarceration. Silence on the other end. Then the sound of Marin shifting, waking up fully. My God, she whispered, that is why they escalated so fast. If that property is rezoned, Naomi, we are talking about 8 figures, maybe more. That is why they couldn't just bully you. They needed a documented legal reason to trigger the forfeiture clause. But I have the scan. I said, I have the proof. Naomi, listen to me, Marin said. Her voice was sharp now. This is good. It is great. But a scan is not an original. In probate court, copies are hard to admit if the other side claims the original was destroyed by the testator by your dad because he changed his mind. What I asked, they will argue that he scanned it, then decided against it, and tore up the original. They will say the fact that the original is missing proves he revoked it, so it's useless. I felt the hope drain out of me. No, Marin said, it proves intent, and more importantly, it proves why they are attacking you. It connects the dots. The police report, the addiction rumors, it all aligns perfectly with the forfeiture clause. It turns their smear campaign into evidence of conspiracy. She paused. But Naomi, you need to understand something. What if 8 figures are on the line, and they know you have this scan? They are not going to stop with Facebook posts. I looked out the window of my mother's house at the dark, empty street. They are going to try to make the clause come true, Marin said. They need you incarcerated or incapacitated. They already tried to arrest me. I said, that was the warning shot. Marin said, if they know you can prove the fraud, they might try something permanent. You need to be careful. You need to verify every interaction. Don't drive alone at night. Don't let anyone into your apartment. I looked at the laptop. The evidence was there, but Marin was right. It wasn't a shield. It was a target. I will be careful. I said, I hung up. I packed the laptop into my bag. I wasn't leaving it here. I walked to the door. My hand on the latch. I had the truth. But truth was a flimsy thing against a sister who had sold her soul for a warehouse, and a lawyer who treated felonies like due diligence. I opened the door and stepped out into the night. The wind rustled the trees, sounding like whispers. Addict, thief, unstable. I tightened my grip on the bag. Let them whisper. I had a voice now, and I was going to scream this truth in a courtroom until the walls shook. But first, I had to survive until the hearing. I walked to my car, checking the shadows, checking the back seat, checking the wheel wells. I wasn't paranoid. I was just hunted. The envelope addressed to the State Bar Association felt heavier than it looked. It was just 10 pages of paper, a cover letter, and a thumb drive containing the security footage from Harbor Lock storage. But as I held it over the blue mailbox slot outside the post office, it felt like I was holding a grenade. "Do it," Marin said. She was standing next to me, her coat collar turned up against the biting wind. I let go. The envelope slid into the dark metal throat of the box with a soft thud. "There is no going back now," I said, staring at the painted eagle logo on the side of the box. "We just accused a premier law firm of ethical misconduct and conspiracy. They declared war first," Marin said, her voice devoid of hesitation. "They sent Bennett Sloan to raid a storage unit. They coordinated a police stop. Filing a complaint is not an act of aggression. Naomi, it is an act of survival." We walked back to her car. The city of Merrow County felt gray and hostile, the sky a flat sheet of slate. The hearing was scheduled for tomorrow morning, 24 hours. "You need to be ready for what happens next," Marin said as we merged onto the highway. "When Lyle Holloway gets notice of that complaint, he is going to come at you with everything he has. He is going to try to break you before you ever take the stand." "I am not going to break," I said. Marin glanced at me. "I believe you," she said, "but you need to understand their strategy. Tessa is going to testify that you are erratic. She is going to talk about the stolen car. She is going to bring up the addiction rumors. Your job is not to get angry. Your job is to be the most boring person in the room." "Boring?" I asked. "Yes, boring, predictable, sane. If you cry, they win. If you shout, they win. If you interrupt her to say, 'That is a lie,' they win. You answer yes or no. You stick to the documents. You are a rock. Naomi, waves crash against rocks, but the rock does not move." I nodded. Staring out the window, I could be a rock. I had been a punching bag for 3 days. Hardening into stone felt like a natural evolution. When I got back to my apartment, there was a man waiting for me. He was standing on the welcome mat, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He wore a cheap windbreaker and held a manila envelope. He looked like a delivery driver, but he didn't have a package. "Naomi Patterson?" he asked. "Yes," I said, tightening my grip on my keys. "You have been served," he said. He shoved the envelope into my chest. I instinctively grabbed it to keep it from falling, before I could ask who he was. He turned and jogged down the stairs, disappearing into the parking lot. I went inside and locked the door. I sat on the floor, my back against the wood, and tore open the seal. Superior Court of Merrow County. Civil complaint for conversion and breach of duty. Plaintiff Tessa Caldwell. Administrator of the estate of David Patterson. Defendant Naomi Patterson. Conversion. That was the legal term for theft. I flipped to the second page. There was a list, a long bulleted list titled, "Schedule a missing estate property believed to be in the possession of the defendant." I started reading, and a cold, confusing numbness washed over me. Item 1. Rolex Submariner. Watch, stainless steel. Estimated value, $12,000. Item 2. Antique gold coin collection. Estimated value, $8,000. Item 3. Diamond tennis bracelet. Estimated value, $5,000. Item 4. Cash reserves kept in home safe. Estimated value, $20,000. I lowered the paper. My father wore a Timex. He bought it at a pharmacy in 1998. He boasted about it because it had a glowing dial. He never owned a Rolex in his life. Gold coins Dad collected, fishing lures, diamond bracelet. Who would that even be for Mom? They had been divorced for 15 years. And even when they were married, Mom preferred turquoise. I read the list again. Cash reserves. Dad didn't believe in keeping cash in the house. He said it was a fire hazard. He put every spare cent into the bank or the market. This list wasn't an inventory. It was a template. It was the rich person's estate starter pack. Tessa was making it up. She was listing things that sounded like they should be in a wealthy man's estate, hoping the judge would believe they existed and that I had stolen them. I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound in the empty apartment. They were getting sloppy. If they were accusing me of stealing a Rolex that never existed, they were guessing. They were throwing mud at the wall to see what would stick. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the list. I sent it to Marin with a caption, "They are writing fiction now. Dad never owned any of this." Marin called me 2 minutes later. "This is good," she said. Her voice sounded energized. "Good?" I asked. "Being sued for $50,000 of imaginary jewelry is good. It proves they don't have an actual inventory." Marin explained. "If they had a real inventory, one created by a professional appraiser, it would list serial numbers. It would list receipts. This is a wish list. We can cross-examine Tessa on this. We can ask her to produce a single insurance rider or receipt for a Rolex. When she can't, her credibility crumbles." She paused. "But Naomi, I have bigger news." What I asked. I just got off an encrypted call. She said, "A junior paralegal from Holloway and Reese reached out to me." My heart skipped a beat. A mole. Who, I asked. "Anonymous." Marin said. "She used a burner email to set up the call. She is scared." "Naomi, she said the atmosphere at the firm has been toxic for weeks. Lyle Holloway is locking down files, shouting at associates. But she saw something on the copier glass yesterday. A memo." "What kind of memo?" "It was an internal billing strategy document." Marin said. "It referenced the Patterson estate. Specifically, it mentioned a contingency fee recovery tied to the restructured distribution." I frowned, trying to parse the legal speak. I thought lawyers billed by the hour. I said, "They do." Marin said, "Especially in probate. It is unethical and in many states illegal for an estate attorney to take a percentage of the estate's value as a contingency fee unless there is extraordinary litigation involved. But this memo suggests that Holloway and Reese isn't just billing hourly. It suggests they have a side deal with Tessa. Explain it to me like I am 5. I said, if the estate is worth $2 million and they bill hourly, maybe they make $20,000 in fees. Marin said, but if they have a restructured distribution deal, let's say they helped Tessa trigger that forfeiture clause we found. Let's say they help her secure the River Road warehouse. If that property is worth $10 million, and they have a secret agreement to take 5% of the recovered assets, they make $500,000. I whispered. Exactly. Marin said, they aren't just representing her. Naomi, they are partners in the heist. That is why Bennett Sloan is involved. You don't hire a high-end fixer for a standard probate case. You hire him when you are playing for millions. This changes everything. I said, it isn't just about family. It is a racketeering scheme. We need to prove it. Marin said, the paralegal was too scared to send a copy of the memo. She just told me it exists. We need to find the money trail. Did your father pay them anything unusual? A retainer? A flat fee? I don't know. I said, I have been locked out of the accounts. You have the laptop. Marin reminded me, the old Dell. Did he have any banking records saved on the hard drive I ran to the bedroom where I had stashed the laptop under a pile of sweaters? I will check. I said. I hung up and booted up the machine. The fan whirred loudly. A mechanical wheeze in the quiet room. I went back to the File Explorer. I skipped the Documents folder and went to Downloads. There were dozens of PDF files. Bankstatement_jan.pdf. Bankstatement_feb.pdf. He downloaded his statements. I opened the folder for the most recent year. I started with the month he died. August. I scanned the transaction list. Pharmacy, grocery store, gas station, oncologist copay, and then On August 2nd, 3 weeks before he died, a large withdrawal. Check 1405 Holloway Reese Legal Group. Amount $5,000. $5,000. That was a lot for a simple will update. I clicked on the check image link embedded in the PDF. The scan of the check popped up. I looked at the memo line. In my father's shaky block letter handwriting, he had written 3 words: for document security, not legal services, not retainer, document security. I stared at the screen. He paid them to keep something safe, the blue folder. If he paid them to secure the blue folder, and now they were claiming it didn't exist. I grabbed my phone and dialed Marin back. I found a check. I said, August 2nd, $5,000. Memo line says, for document security. Marin let out a sharp breath. That is it, she said. That is the smoking gun for the ethics complaint. If they accepted a fee to secure a document, and that document is now missing while they represent the beneficiary who benefits from its absence, Naomi, that is disbarment territory. We have them, I said, feeling a surge of fierce, hot triumph. We have the bullets. Marin corrected. Now we have to fire them, and we have to do it in open court. Tomorrow morning. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a haze of preparation. I printed the check image. I printed the list of fake stolen items. I printed the email with the scan of the forfeiture clause. But there was one loose thread that kept nagging at me. The timeline. The document security check was dated August 2nd. The voicemail, the one where he told me about the letter in the blue folder, was from April. So in April, he wrote the letter and hid it in the blue folder in the storage unit. Then in August, right before he died, he wrote a check to the lawyers for document security. Why move it? Or did he move it? I looked at the character concern petition again, the one that said I was unstable. If the lawyers had the original letter, the one that gave me the warehouse, they would have destroyed it immediately. They wouldn't have just hidden it. Unless they couldn't destroy it. Unless... My phone buzzed. It was an email notification. Marin again. Subject court order. Safety deposit box. Access log. I opened it. We had subpoenaed the bank records 2 days ago. They had finally arrived. I scrolled through the PDF. Bay Ridge Community Bank. Safety deposit box, 402. Access history. I looked at the dates. August 24th. That was the day after Dad died. Accessed by Tessa Caldwell. Administrator. Time. In 9:00 a.m., timeout. 9:45 a.m., notes inventory conducted, box contents removed. She was there at 9 in the morning. Dad died at 10 o'clock the night before. She hadn't even called the funeral home yet. She hadn't called the obituary writer. She had gone straight to the bank the moment the doors opened. How did she get in? She wasn't the administrator yet. She didn't have the letters of administration. I looked at the column labeled authorization. Presentation of key and death certificate. She had a key and a death certificate. You can't get a death certificate that fast. It takes days. Unless... I zoomed in on the note. Presentation of key and affidavit of death. She didn't have the certificate. She had an affidavit. A sworn statement that he was dead. She was prepared. She knew exactly what to do the second his heart stopped. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty apartment. But something else caught my eye. I looked further down the list. I wanted to see the last time Dad had accessed the box. August 2nd, the same day he wrote the check to the lawyers. Accessed by David Patterson. Time. In 2:15 p.m. Time out. 2:30 p.m. He went to the bank, then he went home and wrote a check to the lawyers for document security. I closed the laptop and sat in the silence. I needed to hear him. I picked up my phone and navigated to the saved voicemail, the one from April. Hey, Naomi, it's Dad. I put a letter in the blue folder. I listened to it again. Then I listened harder. I pressed the phone tight against my ear, closing my eyes, trying to filter out the sound of his voice and hear the world behind him. I am not going to file it with the lawyers, because, well, you know how lawyers are. In the background there was a low hum. air conditioning. And then, just as he said the word lawyers, there was a sound, ding-dong, a two-tone chime, electronic. I knew that sound. It was the door chime at Bay Ridge Community Bank. I had heard it 1,000 times when I went there to deposit my paychecks in high school. Every time the heavy glass door opened, it made that specific, flat electronic chime. He wasn't at the house. He said, "Listen, I am at the house." But he was lying. He was at the bank. Why would he lie? I put a letter in the blue folder. If he was at the bank, he wasn't putting it in the blue folder in the storage unit. He was putting it in the safety deposit box. The blue folder was a decoy. He knew. He knew Tessa snooped. He knew the lawyers were sharky. He created a trail to the storage unit, the blue folder, as a distraction. But the real document, the one he paid the lawyers to secure, or perhaps the one he was hiding from the lawyers, was in the box. And Tessa had emptied the box at 9 a.m, the day after he died. She found it. She found the real letter, and because she found it, she knew she had to destroy me. She knew about the forfeiture clause because she was holding the document that contained it. She took the letter to Holloway and Reese. They saw the value of the warehouse. They saw the clause about substance abuse, and they said, "We can make that happen." The check for document security wasn't to hold the document. It was probably a consultation fee he paid them to review it, or maybe he tried to file it and they rejected it. August 2nd, he went to the bank. He accessed the box. Then he wrote the check to the lawyers. Maybe he sent them a copy. Document security. What if he didn't trust them? What if the check wasn't for them to hold it? What if the check was a trail? What if he wrote, "For document security" on the check, so that if the document disappeared, there would be a record that he intended for it to be secure? My head was spinning, but one thing was clear. The voicemail was the key. He lied about his location. He was at the bank. The blue folder he mentioned was a code, or a diversion. Tessa fell for it. She went to the storage unit with Bennett Sloan. They found the decoy blue folder, the one I found the scrap of. But she had already cleared the bank box. If she cleared the bank box on August 24th and raided the storage unit on Tuesday, she was looking for something she didn't find in the bank box. My eyes widened. She didn't find it in the bank box. If she had found the will in the bank box, she wouldn't have needed to raid the storage unit weeks later. She emptied the box. It was empty. Where was the letter? I looked at the timeline. April voicemail. I put a letter in the blue folder. Lies about being at the house. Is actually at the bank. August 2nd. Visits bank. Writes check to lawyers for document security. August 23rd as. August 24th. Tessa opens box. Finds nothing or finds something else. Tuesday, Tessa raids storage unit. Finds the blue folder. Destroys it. She raided the storage unit because the bank box was a bust. So where was the document August 2nd? He wrote the check to Holloway and Reese. Maybe he gave it to them. But Lyle Holloway said he didn't have it, unless he was lying, or... I looked at the check image again. Holloway Reese Legal Group. Wait, I zoomed in on the endorsement line on the back of the check. Usually, a business check is stamped, deposit only, Holloway Reese operating account. This check wasn't stamped, it was signed, Lyle Holloway, and under his signature, a handwritten account number. I typed the account number into Google. Nothing. But the routing number. I typed the routing number. Cayman National Bank. It wasn't a firm account. It was an offshore account. My father didn't pay the firm. He paid Lyle Holloway directly, into a personal, offshore account. For document security. That wasn't a service fee. That was a bribe. Or blackmail. No, Dad wouldn't blackmail. He paid Lyle to hide it, no. That didn't make sense. He paid Lyle to hold it personally, outside the firm's records. Because he didn't trust the firm's system, or because Lyle told him to if Lyle took $5,000 personally to hold a document, and now he was claiming the document didn't exist. Lyle had the will. Lyle Holloway was sitting on the document that gave me the warehouse. He was hiding it from Tessa and me. He was playing both sides. He was helping Tessa destroy me so the forfeiture clause would trigger. and then he would likely produce the will after I was disinherited. Claiming he found it, ensuring the property went to the estate which he was now pillaging through the contingency fee, he was the architect. Tessa was just the demolition crew. I sat back, the air leaving my lungs. I wasn't just fighting a greedy sister. I was fighting a man who had been stealing from my father before he was even cold. I looked at the clock. It was 3 a.m. The hearing was in 6 hours. I stood up and walked to the closet. I pulled out my suit. It was the same one I had worn to the interview the day I was arrested. I brushed the lint off the shoulder. I went to the bathroom and washed my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. The dark circles under my eyes looked like bruises, but my eyes were clear. I wasn't going to court to beg for my share. I wasn't going to court to ask for fairness. I was going to court to burn Lyle Holloway to the ground. I had the check. I had the offshore routing number. I had the video of his fixer. I had the text of the forfeiture clause. Marin said to be a rock. I wasn't going to be a rock. I was going to be an avalanche. I laid the suit out on the chair. I placed the folder with the printed evidence next to it. I turned off the light and lay down on the bed. Fully dressed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind rattle the window pane. Ding-dong. The sound of the bank chime played in my head. My father tried to tell me. He left a trail of breadcrumbs. And tomorrow, I was going to shove those breadcrumbs down Lyle Holloway's throat. The Merrill County Probate Court was a room designed to make you feel small. The ceilings were too high. The wood paneling was too dark, and the air was thick with the smell of old varnish and older grudges. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Marin. My hands folded so tightly in my lap that my knuckles were white. Across the aisle, Tessa sat with Lyle Holloway. She was wearing a navy blue dress with a high collar modest. Serious. The uniform of the dutiful daughter. She didn't look at me. She stared straight ahead at the judge's bench, her posture rigid, like a porcelain doll that might shatter if someone tapped the glass. Judge Eleanor Vance swept into the room, her black robe billowing. She was a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair cut into a sharp bob and eyes that looked like they had seen every variety of human greed imaginable. "We are here on the matter of the estate of David Patterson," Judge Vance said, her voice crisp. "We have an emergency motion to suspend the temporary administrator and a counter-motion regarding estate inventory. Ms. Caldwell, you may take the stand." Tessa walked to the witness box. She moved with a practiced hesitancy, touching a tissue to her nose. "State your name for the record." Tessa Caldwell. Lyle Holloway stood up. He didn't strut today. He was subdued, respectful. "Ms. Caldwell, can you tell the court why you filed the initial petition for emergency administration?" Tessa took a shaky breath. "I did it to protect my father's legacy," she said softly. "After Dad died, everything was chaotic. I noticed immediate irregularities in the accounts, withdrawals, missing paperwork, and my sister." She paused, glancing at me with wide, fearful eyes. "Naomi has been struggling since she lost her job." Tessa continued, "I love her, but she has been very distinct, different. I was afraid that in her grief, she might make decisions that would hurt the estate, or herself." And the incident with the vehicle, Lyle asked, gently. Tessa looked down at her hands. "I didn't want to involve the police," she whispered, "but the car is an estate asset, and when I couldn't reach her, when I realized she had taken it without communicating, I felt I had a fiduciary duty to secure the property. I was just trying to keep everything safe until the probate process could start. She was good. She didn't call me a thief. She didn't call me an addict. She just painted a picture of a sad, desperate woman who needed to be managed by a responsible older sister." Lyle sat down, looking satisfied. Marin stood up. She didn't walk to the podium. She stood right at our table, holding a single piece of paper. "Ms. Caldwell," Marin began, her voice cool and level. "You stated that you filed the stolen vehicle report because you could not reach your sister. Is that correct?" "Yes," Tessa said. "Did you call her?" Marin asked. "I think so," Tessa said. "It was a chaotic morning. We have subpoenaed your phone records." "Ms. Caldwell. Marin said, there were no outgoing calls to Naomi Patterson on Tuesday morning. In fact, the first call you made that morning was to the police non-emergency line. I was panicked. Tessa said quickly, I didn't know where she was. You didn't know where she was? Marin asked. Yet the police report states that you told officers she might be driving near the Briar Glen Industrial Park. How did you know she would be there? Tessa blinked. I guessed. She had an interview. You guessed? Marin repeated. Or did you know because you had been tracking her location? Objection. Lyle said, half rising, speculation, sustained. Judge Vance said, move on, counsel. Marin picked up another document. You also stated that you were concerned about irregularities in the accounts. Can you name a specific irregularity that occurred before you were appointed Administrator I? There were cash withdrawals, Tessa said vaguely. Your father died on August 23rd. Marin said, the bank records show no withdrawals between his death and your appointment. The only activity was a freeze put on the accounts. So what irregularities were you referring to? Tessa shifted in her seat. It was a feeling. She said, a general sense of instability. A feeling. Marin repeated, so you had my client arrested at gunpoint based on a feeling I didn't tell them to use guns, Tessa snapped, her composure cracking for a fraction of a second. No, Marin said, you just told them she was stealing a vehicle and that she was erratic. You gave them the script, Ms. Caldwell. You can't blame the actors for following it. Marin sat down. Naomi Patterson. Judge Vance called out. I stood up. My legs felt heavy. But I walked to the stand. I swore to tell the truth. Ms. Patterson, Marin asked, tell the court what happened on Tuesday afternoon. I took a breath. I looked at the judge. Be a rock. I was driving home from an interview. I said, my voice was steady, lower than usual, but steady. I was pulled over on County Road 9. 2 officers approached with weapons drawn. They ordered me out of the car, handcuffed me, and detained me for 1 hour. They informed me the vehicle had been reported stolen by the estate administrator. Did you steal the car? Marin asked. No, I said. I have been the primary driver of that vehicle for 3 years. My sister has never driven it. She has never asked for the keys. And after you were released, I returned home to find that my access to my father's trust portal had been revoked. I said, the security questions had been changed. Changed to what? Changed to questions only a family member would know. I said, like where my parents met. I looked at Tessa. She was staring at the table. This all happened within a 24-hour window. I continued. The police report, the portal lockout, the petition for emergency administration. It was not a series of accidents. It was a coordinated effort to isolate me and seize control of the assets before I could object. Lyle Holloway stood up for cross-examination. He buttoned his jacket. Ms. Patterson, he said, smiling kindly. You mentioned you lost your job recently. Is that true? Yes, I said. And you have been under a great deal of financial stress. I have bills, like everyone else, I said. But I have savings. Is it true you asked your sister for a loan 2 weeks before your father died? I said, that is a lie. Ms. Caldwell has a text message where you mention needing money, Lyle said, waving a piece of paper. I narrowed my eyes. That was for the funeral flowers. I said, I paid for the arrangements up front and asked her to reimburse her half. That text says, I need the money for the florist. Context matters. Mr. Holloway, Lyle paused. He hadn't expected me to remember the specific text. You seem very angry. Miss Patterson, he said, do you feel that your anger makes it difficult for you to work with your sister? I am not angry, I said. I am disappointed, and I am testifying to the facts of a false police report. That is not an emotional reaction. That is a legal one. Lyle frowned. He dismissed me. Marin stood up again. Your Honor, she said, we would like to introduce Exhibit C, surveillance footage from Harbor Lock Storage. Dated this past Tuesday. The bailiff set up a screen. The video played. The grainy black and white footage showed the black sedan. The man in the coat, Tessa. Marin paused the video on the frame where Bennett Sloan was holding the briefcase. Ms. Caldwell, Marin said, addressing Tessa, who was still at the plaintiff's table. Who is the man in this video? Tessa looked at Lyle. Lyle remained impassive, but his jaw muscle twitched. That is Mr. Sloan, Tessa said, her voice barely a whisper. And what is Mr. Sloan's profession? He is a consultant, a security consultant, Marin corrected. One who specializes in asset recovery. Why did you bring a security consultant to your father's storage unit? We were looking for missing assets. Tessa said, I had a list of items that were unaccounted for. I wanted a witness present when we opened the unit. Missing assets, Marin said. She walked back to her table and picked up the civil complaint, the list of the Rolex and the gold coins. Is this the list? Marin asked. Yes, Tessa said. Your Honor, Marin said, turning to the judge. I would like to draw the court's attention to the metadata on the file for this list, which was provided to us in discovery. The file titled Missing Assets Schedule A was created on Wednesday morning. The courtroom went silent. Wednesday morning. Marin repeated, the day after the storage unit visit. She turned back to Tessa. So, Ms. Caldwell. You went to the storage unit on Tuesday to look for items on a list you hadn't written yet. Tessa's mouth opened, then closed. I had a mental list. She stammered. I wrote it down later for the lawyers. A mental list, Marin said skeptically. And did you find these missing items in the storage unit? The Rolex, the gold coins. Number, Tessa said. The unit was mostly empty. Mostly empty, Marin said. Yet the video shows Mr. Sloan leaving with a full briefcase. What was in the briefcase? Ms. Caldwell. I don't know, Tessa said. Papers. Just old papers. Old papers, Marin said. If they were just old papers, why did a security consultant need to carry them out in a locked briefcase? Why not a cardboard box? I don't recall, Tessa said. Her voice was getting higher, thinner. Did those papers include a blue folder? Marin asked. Tessa flinched. It was small, a slight recoil of her shoulders. But from where I sat, it looked like she had been electrocuted. I don't know what you're talking about, Tessa said. Marin walked to the bench. Your Honor, Marin said, we have reason to believe that the petitioner and her counsel are suppressing a testamentary document. We have evidence that the decedent paid the firm of Holloway and Reese $5,000 for document security 3 weeks before his death, and yet the firm claims to hold no such documents. Lyle Holloway shot out of his chair. Objection, he roared. This is privileged attorney-client communication, and it is completely irrelevant to the administration of the estate. Ms. Klein is fishing. It is not fishing if we have the check, Judge Vance said, staring Lyle down. Do you have the check? Ms. Klein. Marin handed the copy of the check to the bailiff. The judge put on her glasses. She looked at the check. She looked at the back of the check. Mr. Holloway, the judge said, her voice dropping to a dangerous register. Why was this check deposited into an account in the Cayman Islands? Lyle paled. The slick, confident mask slipped, revealing the sweat underneath. It is a holding account for international tax planning. Lyle stammered. Standard procedure for certain asset classes. The decedent was a retired school administrator. Judge Vance said. He did not have international asset classes. He had a fishing boat and a savings account. She took off her glasses. I am ordering the immediate production of all internal communications regarding the Patterson file, Judge Vance said, including any and all emails between your firm and Mr. Bennett Sloan and Mr. Holloway. If I find out that you are holding a testamentary document in an offshore trust to avoid probate discovery, I will refer this matter to the district attorney myself. Lyle sat down slowly. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. But Marin wasn't done. Your Honor, she said, we have one final witness. We call Mr. Arthur Evans, custodian of records for Bay Ridge Community Bank. A small man in a gray suit walked to the stand. He looked terrified. He carried a thick binder. Mr. Evans, Marin said, did you bring the access logs for safety deposit box 402? Yes, Mr. Evans said. Can you tell us who accessed the box on August 24th? Ms. Tessa Caldwell, he said. And before that, Mr. David Patterson accessed it on August 2nd. Marin projected an image onto the screen. It was a digital capture of the sign-in sheet. Mr. Evans, Marin said, you have worked at Bay Ridge for 20 years. You knew David Patterson. Yes. Mr. Evans said, he came in every Friday. Look at the signature for August 2nd. Does that look like David Patterson's signature to you, mister? Evans squinted at the screen. No, he said clearly. David had a tremor in his right hand. His signature was always jagged. This signature, it is smooth. It flows. So, in your professional opinion, the person who signed in as David Patterson on August 2nd was not David Patterson, mister. Evans shook his head. No, ma'am, it looks like a forgery. A good one, but a forgery. The courtroom buzzed. Marin turned to Tessa. Ms. Caldwell, Marin said, you testified that you were worried about irregularities. Did you know that someone accessed your father's safety deposit box 3 weeks before he died? Posing as him. Tessa stared at the screen. She was shaking now, visibly shaking. I didn't know, she whispered. Marin leaned in. Or did you know, Marin asked softly. Did you know because you were the one who sent someone to do it? Did you send Bennett Sloan to the bank on August 2nd to retrieve the document? And when he failed, when he found the box empty or couldn't get what he wanted, you had to go back yourself on August 24th with an affidavit. I didn't, Tessa cried out. Her voice cracked, high and desperate. I didn't send him to the bank. I only sent him to the storage unit. The room froze. Only sent him to the storage unit. She had just admitted to hiring Bennett Sloan. She had admitted to sending him. Marin smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. So you admit you hired a fixer to raid your father's property, Marin said. Tessa looked around the room. She looked at Lyle, who was staring at his desk, refusing to meet her eyes. She looked at the judge, who was looking at her with undisguised disgust. And finally, she looked at me. Her eyes weren't angry anymore. They were terrified. They told me I had to. She sobbed. The words tumbled out of her, broken and jagged. Lyle said if we didn't find the blue folder, you would get the warehouse. He said you would sell it. He said you would ruin Dad's legacy. He said we had to trigger the clause. Tessa Lyle shouted, Shut your mouth! Sit down! Counsel Judge Vance slammed her gavel down so hard it sounded like a gunshot. Tessa was crying freely now, her face buried in her hands. He said it was standard, she wailed. He said it was just asset protection. I didn't want to arrest you. Naomi. I just wanted the warehouse. I just wanted what was fair. Fair, I thought. You put a gun to my head for a warehouse. Judge Vance leaned forward. Tessa Caldwell, the judge said, her voice shaking with controlled rage. I am hereby removing you as administrator of this estate, effective immediately. I am appointing a county fiduciary to take possession of all assets, including the vehicle and the contents of any safety deposit boxes or storage units. The judge turned to Lyle. Mr. Holloway, you are to remain in this building. The sheriff's deputies will be escorting you to your office to oversee the seizure of your files, and I am issuing a bench warrant for the arrest of Bennett Sloan for burglary and tampering with evidence. The gavel banged again. Court is adjourned. The room erupted into noise. Deputies moved toward Lyle. Marin grabbed my arm, squeezing it tight. We did it, she whispered. Naomi, we did it. I looked across the aisle. Tessa was sitting alone. Lyle had moved away from her as if she were contagious. She looked small, ruined. I stood up. I smoothed my skirt. I walked out of the courtroom, past the reporters who were already gathering, past the neighbors who had called me an addict on Facebook. I pushed open the heavy doors and stepped out into the sunlight. I expected to feel triumph. I expected to feel the rush of victory, the cinematic swell of music that happens at the end of the movie when the hero wins. But there was no music. There was just the noise of traffic, the smell of exhaust, and a hollow, aching space in my chest where my family used to be. I had the warehouse. I had the money. I had my name back, but I had lost my sister. I had lost my uncle. I had lost the illusion that blood meant anything when there were millions of dollars on the table. Marin came up beside me. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I will be," I said. I looked back at the courthouse. "They thought they could break me," I said. "They thought I was the weak one." I put on my sunglasses. They were wrong. I walked down the steps, my heels clicking on the concrete, walking away from the wreckage of my past and into a future that I would build myself. Brick by brick, alone, if I had to, but free. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope the journey of Naomi Patterson kept you on the edge of your seat. It is a reminder that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we need to watch the most carefully. I would love to hear where you are listening from. Please leave a comment below with your city or country. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of justice and resilience, please subscribe to Revenge Stories and share your thoughts on Naomi's victory in the comments. Until next time.